Most people remember being dropped off at school, at soccer practice, at a friend's house. I remember being dropped off at a train station. My mother said she'd be right back. My brother waved from the passenger seat. They placed bets, actual bets, on whether I could find my way home. I was 8 years old, wearing shoes 2 sizes too big, carrying a backpack with nothing in it. I did not find my way home. I found something better. And when they came looking for me 20 years later, 29 missed calls in one morning, I had already built a life that didn't include a single one of them. Welcome back to Calm Drama Story. Get comfortable. Today's story is about the people who throw you away and the ones who pick you up. If this is your first time here, subscribe, drop a comment, and settle in. This one's going to stay with you. The last thing my mother said before she drove away was not, "I love you." It was, "Let's see if you can figure it out." November. Millhaven Station, a platform at the end of a commuter line that nobody commuted to anymore. I was sitting in the back seat of my mother's Chevy, picking at a loose thread on the seatbelt, when she pulled into the gravel lot and killed the engine. Tyler was 12. He sat in the front seat, one knee up against the dashboard, grinning like he'd just won something. My mother turned around and looked at me. Not the way mothers look at their children, the way someone looks at a suitcase they've decided not to bring. "Get out," she said. I got out. I was wearing Tyler's old sneakers, white, scuffed, 2 sizes too big. My backpack had nothing in it. She'd told me to pack it that morning but hadn't said what to put inside. So I zipped it up empty and carried it anyway, because when you're 8, you do what your mother tells you even when it makes no sense. Tyler leaned out the window. "I bet $5, she cries before she moves. My mother didn't correct him. She put the car in reverse. People who are about to do something unforgivable always make it sound casual. They use words like just and real quick and let's see. The cruelty is in the tone. The tone says, "This is nothing." And that is exactly how you know it is everything. The taillights shrank to 2 red dots. Then nothing. I stood on that platform for 2 hours. I know because I counted every train that didn't stop. 4 trains. 8 headlights. None of them slowed down. I didn't know it yet. But the woman who would change my life was sitting 3 benches away, reading a paperback with a cracked spine. The woman who saved my life was wearing reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and holding a book she'd read 4 times. Margaret Calloway was 52, retired 3rd-grade teacher. She'd been waiting for the 7:40 train to visit her sister in Richmond, and the 7:40 was running late, which it did every Thursday, which Margaret knew, which is why she brought the paperback. She told me later that she noticed the shoes first. A child in shoes that don't fit is a child somebody dressed in a hurry, or a child nobody dressed at all. She didn't ask where my parents were. She didn't crouch down and speak in that high-pitched voice adults use when they're trying not to scare you. She walked over, sat on the bench next to mine, and said, "Have you eaten?" I shook my head. She bought me a juice box from the vending machine near the ticket window. Apple. The straw was bent. I remember that because I spent a long time trying to straighten it, and she let me, and she didn't rush me, and that was the first kind thing anyone had done for me in a day that felt like it had lasted a week. She called the police from the payphone by the restroom. She waited with me. She didn't ask me to explain. When the officers arrived, I answered their questions. Name, age, address, mother's name. I answered all of them in the same flat voice because I had already decided, somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd train, that crying was not going to bring the Chevy back. The last thing I said to the officers was a question. "Is my mom coming back?" They looked at each other. And she didn't promise me anything that night. She just said, "I'll check on you." And she did. Every single week. The state of Virginia gave my mother 2 chances to take me back. She declined both times, once by phone, once by certified mail. The social worker's name was Linda. She had a lanyard with too many keychains and a folder with my name on it that got thicker every week. She called my mother the morning after. I know because I was sitting in a plastic chair outside her office, swinging my legs, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear everything I needed to hear. "She's safe, Ms. Ridley. She's at the county intake center. We can arrange pickup today." My mother's voice, tinny through the speakerphone. She ran off. I can't control her. Linda paused. I could hear the pause through the wall. "Ma'am." And she was found at a train station, alone, at night. Like I said, she ran off. She does that. I was 8. I had never run off anywhere. The farthest I'd ever gone alone was the mailbox at the end of the driveway. The second attempt came by letter. Official. Return receipt requested. My mother did not sign for it. Her husband, Rick, signed instead and wrote in the margin, "We don't have room for another kid right now." Another kid. Like I was a stray that had wandered into the wrong yard. You mothers out there who've had to explain to a child why they can't go home, you know there's a silence that comes after. Not the sad kind. The kind where the child stops asking. I stopped asking on day 3. 14 months I spent in foster care. 2 families. Neither bad. Neither permanent. Just beds in rooms that belonged to somebody else, with toothbrushes that came in plastic wrap. 14 months later, a woman who owed me nothing signed a stack of papers that said she wanted me. My own mother couldn't even return a phone call. Margaret's house smelled like tomato plants and old paperbacks. I didn't know it then, but that was the smell of safety. She lived on a half-acre at the end of Potter's Lane, a yellow house with a screen door that never latched right, and a garden that produced more tomatoes than any 2 people could eat. She drove a 2001 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a library card in the glove box. She was not rich. She was not connected. She was a retired teacher on a pension who decided that a child sitting alone on a train platform at night deserved better than what she'd gotten. She taught me to read properly, not just the words, but the weight behind them. Every night after dinner, we sat on the porch and read aloud. She picked books with women in them who solved their own problems. I didn't understand why until I was older. Every summer, she taught me to garden. Tomatoes, basil, peppers. She said growing things was proof that patience worked and that most of life's problems could be fixed with good soil and enough time. She volunteered at the Briarfield Public Library every Thursday. She said books were the most honest things humans ever made. They don't pretend to love you, they just give you everything they have. I fell in love with the library before I fell in love with anything else. The shelves, the quiet. The way nobody asked you to explain yourself, you just had to return what you borrowed and be gentle with the spines. Margaret told me something once on a night when I couldn't sleep, when the question of why was louder than usual. She said, "You don't owe the world an apology for surviving. You owe yourself a life." For 20 years, my mother didn't look for me, and I returned the favor. Margaret died on a Tuesday in February. The tomatoes hadn't come up yet. A stroke. In her sleep. The doctors said it was fast, that she likely didn't feel anything. I have spent 2 years trying to decide if that was a comfort or just something doctors say to the person standing in the hallway. I was 26. I'd been working at the Briarfield Public Library for 4 years by then. Front desk, then programming, then assistant manager. Margaret came to every event I organized, every read aloud, every book fair, every summer kickoff. She sat in the 3rd row and clapped like I'd just given a TED Talk. She left me the house on Potter's Lane, the garden, the Honda Civic. A shelf of books she'd arranged in an order only she understood. And a note, written on the back of a grocery list, tucked inside a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Plant the tomatoes in April. Read something good in October. And never let anyone make you small. She also left a sealed envelope, already stamped, with no address written on it. I found it months later in a drawer with old tax returns and a recipe for peach cobbler. I didn't understand it then. I would. I became the head librarian at Briarfield the following year, the youngest one they'd ever had. And the board said Margaret would have been proud. I said she would have said, well, it's about time. I decided to raise funds for a children's reading room in her name. A quiet space in the library where kids could sit on soft chairs and read without anyone rushing them. A room where the door was always open and the juice boxes were free. I didn't know that decision would bring my mother's ghost back into my life, except this time, the ghost was still breathing. The morning before everything changed, I was arranging children's books by color because a 6-year-old told me that's how libraries should work. The dedication was set for Saturday. 2 weeks of planning. The Margaret Calloway Reading Room. I'd spent 4 months fundraising, bake sales, community grants, a silent auction where someone paid $60 for a quilt Margaret made in 2014. The room was ready. New carpet, low shelves, beanbag chairs in blue and yellow, and a framed photograph of Margaret on the wall beside the door, smiling in that way she had, like she knew a joke she wasn't going to tell you. I had the speech in a folder on my desk. 3 pages. Margaret's life, her teaching career, her love for books, her belief that every child deserved a quiet place to think. Standard, warm, safe. In the lobby, the poster was already up. Gold letters on navy, the Margaret Calloway Reading Room, grand opening Saturday, October 18th. Her name looked right in gold. That afternoon, I went down to the basement to get more folding chairs and found a box I hadn't opened since Margaret died. Labeled in her handwriting, letters, personal. Inside, 5 envelopes, each addressed to the same person. Donna Ridley. Margaret had written to my mother. 5 letters over 10 years. Updates about me, my first report card, a school photo from 4th grade, a note that said, "She is doing well. She is reading above her grade level. If you would like to see her, I would be happy to arrange it." Not one was answered, but one had been returned. On the front of the envelope, in blue ballpoint ink, in handwriting I recognized from grocery lists a lifetime ago. "Stop sending these. She's not mine anymore." My phone was on silent. It had been on silent for 20 years, metaphorically speaking. That morning, it decided to scream. I had not heard my brother's voice in 20 years. It sounded exactly the same, urgent, entitled, tin and absolutely certain that whatever he needed was more important than whatever I was doing. The screen lit up while I was still kneeling on the basement floor holding Margaret's letters. 29 missed calls, 3 different numbers, 11 voicemails. The calls had started at 6 a.m. and hadn't stopped. I pressed play on the first one. "Audrey, this is Tyler, your brother." A pause, like that needed clarifying. "Mom is sick. Real sick. Cancer. You need to call me back. Today." I pressed play on the 5th one. "I know you're getting these." His voice had shifted, tighter, hotter, the way a pot handle gets when you forget the burners on. "I drove 4 hours to find you and you won't pick up? Don't be selfish, Audrey. This isn't about you." I pressed play on the 9th one, a different voice, a woman I didn't recognize. "Hi. Audrey. This is Karen, Tyler's wife. I'm sorry to bother you. Your mother is in hospice care. She's been asking for you. She says your name every night. I know this must be hard, but please, please call us back." People who have done something wrong always overcorrect when they meet you. They call too many times. They leave too many messages. They say urgent when they mean, "I've run out of options." I sat at Margaret's kitchen table, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, looking out at the tomato garden through the window above the sink. The vines were done for the season. Brown. Spent. Waiting for next year. 29 calls. Not one of them started with, "I'm sorry." 11 voicemails. The first one said, "Please." The last one said, "You'll regret this." That's the full emotional range of my brother. I played them all, one after another, sitting at the kitchen table while my coffee went cold. The pattern was clean. Voicemail 1 through 3. Sympathy. Tyler's voice soft, concerned. A version of himself he must have rehearsed in the car. 4 through 7. Frustration. His real voice leaking through. You owe this family, Audrey. 8. Karen again, softer, trying to patch whatever he'd torn. 9 through 11. Threats. Not the kind that get you arrested, the social kind. People are going to find out what kind of daughter you are. The church already knows you won't come. Everyone in this town is going to hear about this. He'd already started his campaign. Before I even listened to the first message, he'd been laying groundwork. I called Ruth Emerson at 7:15 that morning. Ruth was 61, a family attorney, and the closest thing Margaret had to a best friend. They'd known each other for 30 years. Ruth had handled Margaret's estate, driven Margaret to her chemo scares, and once brought her a pie so bad that Margaret used it as a doorstop for 3 days before either of them mentioned it. Don't call them back yet, Ruth said. Her voice was the voice of someone who had read enough custody files to know that silence was a strategy, not a weakness. Let me find out what's actually happening. I didn't call back. I went to work. I shelved 14 boxes of donated books. I answered emails about the dedication. I rearranged the display case in the lobby. I watered Margaret's tomatoes when I got home. And I did not pick up the phone. Tyler called himself the man of the family. The family had a mortgage, 3 maxed credit cards, and a leaking roof. He was definitely in charge of something. Ruth called on Thursday at 6:14 p.m., which told me everything I needed to know. Ruth never calls after 5 unless the news requires wine. Here's what I found. I could hear her reading glasses hitting the desk. Donna Ridley, 54. Lung cancer, stage 4. Hospice in Danville. Tyler Ridley, 32. Filed for bankruptcy in March. Lost the house in June. Well, almost lost the house. That's where it gets interesting. She paused. I poured the wine myself. But that's not the part you need to hear. Another pause. I made some calls. Donna has been attending Grace Fellowship Church in Danville for about 15 years. Active member, prayer circle, women's ministry. And she has been telling that congregation for 20 years that her daughter ran away as a young girl and she has been searching for her ever since. I put the glass down. She told them you left, Audrey, that she tried to find you, that she spent years grieving. Pastor Holbrook has organized prayer sessions for her, multiple times. The whole church believes she is a mother in mourning. Any of you who've sat at enough kitchen tables to know, some families don't break apart. They were never together. They just sat close enough to look like they were. Ruth's voice dropped half a register. She doesn't want your forgiveness, Audrey. She wants your face. There's a difference. If you show up at that hospice, sit beside that bed. Let the pastor see you. Her story holds. She gets to die as the mother whose prodigal daughter finally came home. If you don't show up, her 20 years of fiction fall apart. My mother had been telling people I abandoned her. The woman who left me at a train station told a church full of people that I was the one who left. Tyler showed up at the library on a Wednesday. He was wearing a shirt that needed ironing and a smile that needed more work than the shirt. I saw him through the front window before he saw me. He was standing in the parking lot, looking at the building like he was appraising it. Hands in his pockets, sunglasses on even though it was overcast. I waited until after closing. I didn't want him inside. Not in Margaret's building. He was leaning against a pickup truck with a dent in the fender and a bumper sticker I couldn't read from that distance. He straightened up when I walked out. Audrey. He opened his arms like we were at a family reunion. I kept mine at my sides. Tyler. Mom cries every night asking for you. He said it the way people say things they've practiced, smooth, timed, with just enough tremor. When did you find out where I was? He blinked. What? When did you find out where I was? He looked away. Then, a couple years ago, I guess, when Margaret's obituary ran in the paper. 2 years. They'd known where I was for 2 years and contacted me only when they needed something. You bet $5 I'd cry before I moved. I was 8. Do you remember that, Tyler? His jaw shifted. That was just kids playing around. You were 12. Come on, Audrey, that was 20 years ago. And yet here you are. He didn't have an answer for that. I got in my car, turned the ignition, rolled the window down 1 inch. Don't come to my library again. Donna told the church I ran away. I was 8. I didn't even know which direction north was. But sure, run away. He stood in the parking lot watching me drive away. I wondered if that was how I looked, standing on that platform, watching their taillights disappear. Except I was 8, and I wasn't the one who deserved to be left. The pastor called on a Saturday morning, which is when pastors call when they want you to feel the weight of Sunday coming. Audrey, this is Jim Holbrook. I'm the pastor at Grace Fellowship over in Danville, your mother's church. His voice was kind, steady. The kind of voice that fills a sanctuary without a microphone. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I minded, but I said, go ahead. Pastor, your mother is very ill. I've known her for many years now, and I can tell you she talks about you constantly. Whatever happened between you two, and I know families are complicated, this may be your last chance to make things right. With all due respect, Pastor, you don't know what happened between us. A beat. Donna told me everything. She said you left home very young, that she's carried that pain a long time. I closed my eyes. 20 years of fiction, confirmed by a man of God. She told you I left? She did. I was 8 years old, Pastor Holbrook. Silence. I let it sit there. He didn't ask the obvious follow-up, and I wasn't going to volunteer it. Not yet. Not to him. Not on the phone. By Monday, 2 women from my own town, women I knew from the library's book club, texted me. Gentle messages. We heard about your mom. So sorry, Audrey. Hope you'll visit her soon. Life's too short. Tyler had done his work. He'd come to Briarfield, talked to people, planted the seed. Grieving mother, ungrateful daughter. Simple story. Easy to believe. 5 people who didn't know me told me what kind of daughter I should be. Not one of them asked what kind of mother she was. I know some of you watching this have had that phone call. The one where somebody you haven't heard from in years suddenly needs you to play a part in their story. And everyone around you is saying, just go, just forgive, just be the bigger person. But nobody asks what it cost you to become the bigger person in the first place. If that's you, drop a comment. I'd love to hear how you handled it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. This story isn't done. Margaret kept everything. Report cards, crayon drawings, vaccination records, and 5 letters that were never answered. I'd already found them once, the night of the 29 calls. But that night I'd only read the one with Donna's handwriting on the front. Now, with Tyler's visit and the pastor's call pressing down on me like weather, I went back to the basement and opened the whole box. 5 letters, dated over a span of 10 years. The first, written when I was 9. Dear Donna, Audrey is settling in well. She had a good first day at Briarfield Elementary. She likes reading. I've enclosed a photo from the school picnic. The third, when I was 12. Audrey made the honor roll this semester. She is kind, she is thoughtful, and she deserves to know you. If you would like to visit, and I will arrange everything. The 5th, when I was 15. I have written you 5 times. I will not write again, but I want you to know, she is becoming someone extraordinary. You missed it. Margaret had tried. For 10 years, Margaret had reached across that silence with school photos and report cards and invitations, and received nothing back but one returned envelope and 4 walls of quiet. The returned one, blue ink, Donna's handwriting. Stop sending these. She's not mine anymore. 5 words, written on a Tuesday afternoon. Donna hadn't even opened the envelope. The letter inside was still sealed, the school photo still tucked behind it. A picture of me at 11, gap-toothed, holding a library book. Grief makes people do things that the undamaged version of themselves never would. But cruelty while sober, on a Tuesday afternoon, with a blue ballpoint pen, that is not grief. That is arithmetic. That is someone calculating what you are worth and writing down the answer. I put the envelope in my coat pocket, and I decided that the dedication speech would need to be longer than I planned. The second phone call came without the courtesy of a please. Tyler had moved past that stage. "Listen," he said. "No hello. No warm-up. Mom's got maybe 2 months. If you don't come, I'll make sure everyone in your little town knows you abandoned a dying woman." "You mean the way she abandoned me at a train station? That was 20 years ago. We were kids. Get over it." "You were 12, Tyler. You knew exactly what was happening. I'm not doing this." His voice shifted, louder, faster, and the way it always got when someone cornered him with something he couldn't outrun. "Here's the deal. The house back home. Mom put your name on the deed when you were 6. Some tax thing. I need you to sign the papers so I can sell it." I leaned back in my chair. The kitchen was quiet. Margaret's clock ticked on the wall above the stove, steady as a heartbeat. "Now we're getting to it." "What?" "It was never about Mom crying my name at night, was it?" "It's about both. It's about a signature on a piece of paper and a house that's sinking faster than your credit." He went quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "You owe this family, Audrey. Mom raised you for 8 years. That's 8 years of food, clothes, and a roof. You owe us." "She raised me for 8 years and then left me at a train station in November. I was wearing your old shoes. I didn't have a coat." He hung up. It was never about forgiveness. It was never about dying wishes. It was about a signature on a piece of paper and a house that was sinking faster than Tyler's credit score. And now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. Ruth spread the documents on her kitchen table the way a surgeon lays out instruments, carefully and with the understanding that someone was about to get cut. "Here's the situation." She tapped the deed with a pen. "Your mother added your name to the property in 2003, when you were 6. Technically, it was for a property tax benefit. Claiming a dependent gives a reduction in some Virginia counties, but legally, your name is on this house. Tyler can't sell it without your signature." "I don't want the house, Ruth." "I know you don't. But he doesn't know that. And right now, that signature is the only reason any of them are talking to you." She looked at me over her reading glasses, the same look she'd given Margaret 100 times, the look that meant, "I know what you're about to do, and I want to make sure you've thought it through." "What do you want to do, Audrey?" I looked at the documents. Tyler's bankruptcy filing, Donna's hospice intake form, the property deed with my name on it in 6-year-old font that I obviously hadn't signed myself. "I want to give my speech at the library dedication, and I want to tell the truth." "All of it?" "Every word." She took off her glasses. "You know this changes things. Once you say it in front of that room, there's no taking it back. Donna's church will find out. Tyler will lose whatever leverage he thinks he has. And you'll be the woman who told the truth about her own mother at a public event. I'll be the woman who told the truth. Period." Ruth nodded once. Slow. The nod of a woman who has watched enough court cases to know when someone has already made up their mind. "Then I'll be there, 3rd row." Sending Tyler to negotiate is like sending a toaster to fix the plumbing. My mother's voice sounded like sandpaper wrapped in silk. Rough underneath, smooth on top. The kind of voice that makes you forget, for just a second, what it did to you. The call came on a Thursday evening, an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, some part that was still 8 years old and standing on a platform in shoes that didn't fit, picked up. Baby. That word. Loaded like a gun. Baby, it's Mom. Silence from me. Not the strategic kind. The kind where your throat closes and your body decides for you. I know I wasn't perfect, she said. Her voice was thin, raspy, but still controlled. But I'm dying. Can't you just come see me one time? Why now? Because you're my daughter. I found a letter in Margaret's things. My voice was steadier than I expected. You wrote on the envelope, "She's not mine anymore." Your handwriting. Your words. 11 seconds of silence. I counted. I've always been good at counting things that hurt. Then, Margaret shouldn't have kept those. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I didn't mean it." She blamed a dead woman for keeping the evidence. If you've ever been told you're heartless for not running back to someone who dropped you, I need you to hear this. Staying away is not cruelty. Staying away is the first kind thing you ever did for yourself. I hung up. You can always tell when someone is apologizing for your benefit and not their own. A real apology has weight. It sits in the room like furniture. A fake one floats. It sounds like something, but when you reach for it, your hand goes right through. She blamed a dead woman for keeping the evidence. That was the moment I stopped wondering if she'd changed. People who change don't blame the filing cabinet for what's in the folder. Tyler came back on a Tuesday. He didn't call first. People who plan to make a scene never call first. I was at the front desk, helping a mother renew her children's library cards, when the front door swung open hard enough to rattle the donation jar. Tyler walked in like he owned the foyer. "Where's my sister?" He said it to the room, not to anyone in it. Loud enough that a teenager reading on the couch looked up. Loud enough that the mother with the library cards took a step sideways. He saw me behind the desk and walked straight toward it. "My sister works here and she's refusing to see our dying mother." He aimed the words over my head, at the room. What kind of person does that? The fluorescent lights buzzed. Nobody moved. I stood up slowly, rolled my chair back, folded my hands in front of me, because if they weren't folded, they'd be shaking. And Tyler didn't get to see that. "Tyler, this is a library. Lower your voice or I will ask you to leave. You always were cold. Just like your father. I'll talk to you outside, not here." Outside, in the parking lot, he unloaded. I had ruined their lives by disappearing. I had broken Donna's heart. I owed them. And I owed them everything. And then, "I've talked to a few people around here. They should know who they're dealing with." He'd already planted the seeds. By Wednesday morning, 3 people at the grocery store gave me that look. The one that says, "We heard something about you, and we're deciding whether to believe it." He drove 4 hours to yell at me in a building named after the woman who raised me. I hoped the gas was worth it. Gossip in a small town moves faster than mail, but slower than regret. By Wednesday, half of Briarfield had an opinion about me and a woman they'd never met. At the grocery store, Martha from the book club touched my arm in the cereal aisle. "Audrey, is it true your mother is sick?" At the post office, a man I barely knew held the door and said, "Family is everything. Don't wait too long." At work, my colleague Diane left a card on my desk. "Thinking of you during this difficult time." Inside, a prayer card from a church I'd never attended. Each one was kind, each one was wrong, and each one made the cage a little tighter. Dolores Price, 73, retired school principal, member of the library board, the kind of woman who irons her jeans, found me in my office Thursday afternoon. "Audrey." She closed the door. "I don't know your history, and I am not going to pretend I do, but people are talking, and I want to hear it from you. What's going on?" I told her the short version. Not the whole truth. Not yet. Just enough. Dolores listened without interrupting. When I finished, she adjusted her glasses and said, "Well, that changes things, doesn't it?" That night, I stood in the lobby after everyone had left and looked at the poster on the wall. Gold letters. Margaret's name. Saturday. 5 days away. Silence is golden, they say. But silence in a room full of lies is not gold. It's rust. It eats through everything you built until there's nothing left to stand on. I looked at Margaret's name on that poster and made a decision. Margaret spent her life teaching children to read. I was going to teach a roomful of adults the truth. I wrote 2 versions of the speech. The safe one was 3 pages. The honest one was 5. I knew which one Margaret would have chosen. The safe version talked about Margaret's career, her 31 years in the classroom, her belief that every child could learn to love reading. It mentioned the garden, the library, the Thursday volunteers. It was warm. It was true. And it was incomplete. The honest version started the same way. Margaret's career, the garden, the Thursdays. But on page 3, it turned. It told the story of how Margaret found a child at a train station, why the child was there, who left her, and what happened after. I sat at Margaret's kitchen table and wrote the second version in one sitting. No outline, no notes. It came out the way Margaret taught me to read. One word at a time, without skipping the hard parts. I read it aloud to the empty kitchen. Margaret's clock ticked on the wall. The refrigerator hummed. My voice did not shake. Then I read the letter. She's not mine anymore. I put it in the inside pocket of Margaret's navy blazer, the one she wore to school board meetings and PTA dinners, the one that still smelled faintly of her laundry detergent. Ruth called that evening. "Are you sure about this? Once you say it, it's out." "I've been silent for 20 years, Ruth. That's enough drafts." "I'll be there." "Third row?" "Third row." I folded the 5-page version into my coat pocket, right next to the envelope that said, "She's not mine anymore." They belonged together. Saturday was 3 days away, and I had no idea that Donna would try one more thing before then. They sent the wife. That's what people do when the threats don't work. They send someone softer, someone with a gentler voice, and the same agenda wrapped in a different package. Karen called on a Thursday night 2 days before the dedication. Her voice was warm, apologetic, measured. Everything Tyler's was not. "Audrey, I'm sorry to call again. I know Tyler's been aggressive. That's not how I would have handled it, and I want to apologize for that." I leaned against the kitchen counter and waited. "Donna really is asking for you. Every day. She cries your name at night. Not the way people cry for sympathy. The real way. The way that wakes you up at 2 in the morning and you can hear it through the walls." Something in my chest moved. Not a crack, exactly. More like a floorboard testing its weight. Karen was good. She knew how to find the soft spot. "I know what she did was wrong," Karen continued. "Tyler told me. The station. All of it. And I'm sorry. Truly." Silence. I almost said something. For about 11 seconds I felt the old pull. The pull of the little girl who still wanted to hear "I'm sorry" from someone, from anyone, in that family. Then Karen spoke again. "Also, the house situation. Tyler really needs that signature. The bank is calling every day now. If you could just—" There it is. What? The real reason. Thank you for being honest, Karen. Even if you didn't mean to be. The double-handed shake means either you're deeply sincere or you're deeply calculating. The soft voice on the phone works the same way. You learn to listen for the pause. The tiny gap where the real request hides behind the kindness. Karen almost had me. For about 11 seconds I felt something crack. Then she mentioned the house and the bank, and the crack sealed itself shut. The night before the dedication, I sat on Margaret's porch and listened to the crickets. 20 years later, they sounded exactly the same as the ones at Millhaven Station. The porch light was on. The garden was dark. And the tomato stakes stood like small crosses in the soil, bare for the season but upright, waiting for spring. I thought about the platform, the bench, the vending machine, the shoes. I thought about how cold November is when you're small and nobody's coming. I thought about what I was going to do tomorrow and what it would cost. Not money, not reputation. Something smaller and sharper than both. I was going to stand in a room full of people I respected and show them the part of myself I'd spent 20 years packing away. The part that was left. The part that was not chosen. The part that someone weighed and discarded at 8 years old because the math didn't work out. Margaret's voice, or maybe just the memory of it, came up through the floorboards the way it always did. You don't owe the world an apology for surviving. You women who've buried a mother, or buried the idea of one, you know the difference between grief and relief. And you know they can show up at the same time. I wasn't grieving Donna. I had grieved Donna at 8, at 9, at 12. By 15, the grief had hardened into something quieter. Something you could shelve like a library book you'd finished but didn't want to return. By 20, it was just a fact. My mother left me. This is my life. These are my tomatoes. I went to sleep with the speech on the kitchen table and the envelope in my coat pocket. Tomorrow, one of them would change everything. I just didn't know which one yet. Tyler walked into Margaret's library like he owned it. He didn't even take off his sunglasses. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. The reading room was decorated. Blue and yellow streamers, a table with cookies and lemonade, a small podium with a microphone. About 50 people. Teachers, parents, children, the library board, the mayor's assistant, Pastor Reynolds from the Briarfield Community Church, Dolores in her ironed jeans, front row, Ruth in the third row, as promised, reading her phone with the calm focus of a woman who has filed injunctions before breakfast. I was wearing Margaret's blazer, navy, brass buttons, the envelope in the inside pocket, over my heart. I could feel it when I breathed. 30 minutes before the ceremony, the front door opened and Tyler walked in with Karen beside him. He was wearing a button-down shirt, clean for once. Karen held a phone in front of her, screen facing out. On the screen, Donna, propped against pillows. Pale, thin, yellow in a way that was hard to look at, but her eyes were sharp, clear, calculating, even through a 6-inch screen. "We came to support you, sis," Tyler said. Loud enough for the room. I looked at the phone, at my mother's face. 20 years since I'd seen it. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. But the eyes were the same. The eyes of someone who is always measuring what she can get from a room. They hadn't come to support me. They'd come to rewrite the scene. If the community saw Audrey and her family together, smiling, reunited, standing side by side, then Donna's story held. The prodigal daughter returned at last. Narrative complete. They brought my mother on a screen. A dying woman propped up on pillows, framed inside a phone, held up like a flag. Not a person. A prop. I stepped up to the microphone wearing Margaret's blazer and carrying 20 years of silence in my chest. The room was full. Children sat cross-legged on the new carpet. Parents stood along the walls. Dolores introduced me. Our head librarian, the woman who made this room happen. And the applause was warm, genuine, the kind you get in a small town where people actually know your name. I began the way I'd planned. Margaret Calloway, 3rd grade teacher, 31 years in the classroom, reader, gardener, volunteer. A woman who believed that every child deserved a quiet place to sit and think and become whoever they were going to become. I told them about the tomato garden and the Thursday shifts and the way she arranged books not by alphabet but by how much a child needs them. The room laughed. A few older women nodded. Someone in the back wiped her eyes. I told them about the reading room, why I built it, what it meant, who it was for. This room is for every child who ever walked into a library and felt like the world finally made sense. More applause. The easy part was over. Tyler stood near the back door, arms crossed, Karen beside him holding the phone with Donna's face glowing on the screen. Tyler was smiling, the smile of a man who thinks the performance is going to plan. I looked down at the 5-page speech, then back up. I found Ruth in the third row. She gave me a single nod, the kind that means, I'm here. I turned a page. But I should tell you why that child was at the train station in the first place. Tyler's smile disappeared. It went from the room faster than he did 20 years ago. The next 4 minutes changed everything. I told them. All of it. Slowly. Clearly. The way Margaret taught me to read, one word at a time, and never skip the hard parts. In November of 2005, my mother drove me to Millhaven Station. I was 8 years old. She told me to get out of the car. My brother, who is standing in the back of this room right now, bet $5 I would cry before I moved. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I spoke the way you read a report to a board of directors. Evenly, factually, and with the understanding that the numbers do not lie. She drove away. I stood on that platform for 2 hours in shoes that didn't fit, carrying a backpack with nothing in it. Margaret Calloway found me there. She bought me a juice box. She called the police. I told them about CPS, the 2 phone calls, Donna's refusal. Rick's note in the margin. We don't have room for another kid. I told them about the letters. 5 of them. 10 years. Margaret reaching out, sending photos, offering visits. I reached into the blazer and pulled out the envelope, held it up, did not open it. Just let them see the blue handwriting on the front. Stop sending these. She's not mine anymore. My mother's handwriting. Dated 2009. Tyler stood up. That's not what happened. Ruth, from the third row, without standing, without raising her voice. Sit down, Tyler. He sat. The room was so quiet I could hear Karen's phone buzzing. Donna was saying something on the screen. But nobody was listening to her anymore. For the first time in 20 years, they were listening to me. She wanted me to stand beside her hospital bed so the pastor could see a happy ending. And I was never part of her story. I was the draft she deleted. Tyler tried to fight the truth the way he'd fought everything in his life, loudly, badly, and too late. Dolores stood up from the front row and turned to face him. Is this true? She's making it up. Tyler's voice was louder now, cracking at the edges. She was always dramatic. She always wanted attention. Ruth stood. She was holding a manila folder. She walked to the front of the room, opened it, and placed a single page on the podium beside me. A copy of the CPS intake report. Names redacted. But the date was there. The location, Millhaven Station. The narrative summary. Child found unaccompanied on train platform. Mother contacted. Mother declined to retrieve. Mother declined second contact via certified mail. The room read it the way a room reads a verdict, silently, all at once, and with the slow understanding that someone they trusted had lied to them. Pastor Holbrook, who had driven from Danville for the event, who had organized prayer circles for Donna, who had told me on the phone that my mother had carried that pain a long time, sat perfectly still. His hands were clasped. His face did not move. But his eyes moved. They moved from the document to Tyler to Karen's phone, and then they stayed on the floor. Any of you who've had to stand in front of people and tell a truth that nobody wanted to hear, you remember the way the room changed. Not angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet that means everyone is recalculating. Karen turned off the phone. The screen went dark. Donna's face disappeared. Tyler walked out of the library without saying another word. He did not look back. I know the feeling. The pastor looked at Donna the way you look at a receipt you didn't keep long enough. I finished the speech the way Margaret would have wanted, with a book recommendation and no tears. I turned back to the microphone. The room was still. Not uncomfortable still. The kind of still that means people are listening with their whole bodies. I don't hate my mother. I said it plainly because it was true, and because the truth doesn't need decoration. Hate takes energy I would rather spend on this library, on these kids, on the tomatoes in Margaret's backyard. A few people smiled. Small smiles, the kind that come from recognition. But I will not pretend. I will not stand at a bedside and perform a reunion so someone can die comfortable in a lie. That is not forgiveness. That is theater. I paused. Let the words settle. If you want to honor Margaret Calloway today, read a book to a child tonight. Return a library book on time. And if someone in your life chose you, a teacher, a neighbor, a friend, tell them. Because choosing is harder than biology. Choosing costs something. Margaret paid that cost every day for 20 years, and she never once asked for change. I picked up the scissors from the podium, walked to the ribbon stretched across the doorway of the reading room. Blue ribbon. Inside, the shelves were full, the beanbag chairs were set, and on a small table by the window, I had placed a juice box. Apple. The straw was straight. I cut the ribbon, and the sign above the door read, "The Margaret Calloway Reading Room." The room applauded, not politely, not obligatorily, the kind of applause that comes from people who just watched someone do something brave and are grateful they got to see it. Margaret found me at a train station with an empty backpack and shoes 2 sizes too big. She gave me a home, a name I could trust, and one rule: never apologize for being someone's inconvenience. The pastor found me in the parking lot afterward. He didn't bring a Bible. He brought a cup of coffee and a silence that said more than any sermon. He stood beside me for a full minute without speaking. The October sun was low. Leaves skittered across the asphalt. "I should have asked more questions," he said finally. I didn't argue. He was right. "She told me you ran away," he continued. "She told me she spent years looking for you. I organized a prayer circle for her, Audrey, more than once." "I know." "She cried in front of the congregation. She named you. She described you." "That part, I believe." "The crying." I took a sip of the coffee. It was lukewarm and too sweet. "My mother is very good at performing grief. She's less good at feeling it." He looked at me. Then he looked at the library behind us, at the poster in the window, at Margaret's name in gold. "For what it's worth," he said, "you did the right thing in there. It doesn't feel right yet. It will." Dolores found me next. She wanted to put the story in the community newsletter. I said no. "This isn't a story, Dolores. It's my life. Let it stay in that room." She nodded. She understood. Ruth called that evening, after I'd gone home and sat on the porch with a glass of water and the sound of crickets for company. "Donna's church in Danville is asking questions," she said. "The pastor there, Holbrook, apparently called his colleagues. Word's getting around. 20 years of performance, undone by 5 minutes of truth." I watered the garden in the dark. You don't skip a watering just because the day was hard. Margaret taught me that. Tyler's last phone call came without the threats, without the volume, without the performance. It was the quietest he'd been in a month. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. "You didn't have to do that in front of everyone." His voice was flat, emptied out. "You didn't have to leave me at a train station. We were kids, Audrey. You were 12, I was 8. You knew what you were doing. And Mom was 34. She definitely knew." Silence. The kind that sounds like someone sitting in a car in a parking lot, staring at a steering wheel. "I'm not signing the house papers," I said, "and I'm not coming to see Donna." He started to speak. I kept going. "But I'll tell you what I will do. I'll authorize Ruth to handle the property. Sell it. Split the proceeds. Whatever needs to happen for the medical bills. But I won't stand next to that bed and pretend. She's still your mother. She stopped being my mother at Millhaven Station. Margaret was my mother, and Margaret would have told me to help you with the house and keep my distance from the rest. So that's what I'm doing. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you really loved her, didn't you? Margaret. Yes. She was lucky to have you? No, Tyler. And I was lucky to have her. There's a difference. Forgiveness is not a door you open for someone else. It's a window you open for yourself. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is open that window, breathe, and still leave the door locked. I hung up and sat with the silence. It wasn't the silence of victory. It was the silence of a door closing for the last time, and knowing you're on the right side of it. The house sold in 11 days. Tyler had been trying to sell it for 3 years. Turns out all it needed was one signature from the daughter they threw away. Ruth handled everything. I signed the papers at her office, at her kitchen table, between a plate of shortbread and a stack of tax returns. I never spoke to Tyler during the process. I never went to the house. I never even looked it up online. The proceeds were split according to the deed. 50% Tyler's, 50% mine. My share was $47,000. Not a fortune, not nothing. About what a small house in a dying part of Virginia sells for when the roof leaks and the foundation has a crack that runs from the basement to the porch. I signed every penny of my half over to Donna's hospice account. Not in person. Not with a phone call. Through Ruth. Ruth looked at me from across the table. You don't have to do this. I know, but Margaret would have. Margaret also would have had a strong opinion about people who take advantage of kindness. She would have, and then she would have written the check anyway. Ruth shook her head, but she processed the transfer. I asked her to include a note with the payment. 1 paragraph. I wrote it on the back of a library receipt because that felt right. This is not forgiveness. This is Margaret's influence. She taught me that kindness and boundaries can exist in the same sentence. I hope it helps with the medical bills. I will not be visiting. I wish you comfort. 20 years of silence, then 29 missed calls in one morning. Donna never did understand pacing. Karen called 2 days later. She didn't start with Tyler says or Mom needs. She just said, "Can I tell you something?" I was sitting on the porch. Evening. The light was amber and the garden smelled like turned soil. I said, "Go ahead." Donna got your note. She read it 3 times. Then she held it against her chest and looked out the window for about an hour. She didn't say anything. But she just looked out at the parking lot like she was watching for someone who wasn't coming. I waited. After about an hour, she asked me one question. She said, "Was Margaret good to her?" My throat tightened. Not from sadness. From something else. Something that doesn't have a clean name. The feeling you get when someone finally asks the right question, 20 years too late. "Tell her yes," I said. "Tell her Margaret was everything." Karen's voice went soft. She cried after that. Not the crying she does for the pastor. Not the kind with sound effects. Real crying. The kind with no audience. The kind that bends you forward. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I'm sorry, Audrey. For all of it. I married into this family and I should have asked more questions sooner. Thank you, Karen. Gradual means deliberate. But sometimes gradual also means too late. A person can spend 20 years building a wall and then cry when they finally see what's on the other side. That doesn't mean the wall wasn't their choice. Donna cried without an audience. I don't know if that's redemption or just exhaustion. But for the first time in 20 years, it sounded honest. I sat on the porch until the stars came out. Then I went inside, locked the door, and made a cup of tea. Donna died on a Sunday in April. I found out on Monday. I watered the tomatoes on Tuesday. Karen texted. Not Tyler. A simple message. Donna passed peacefully last night. I thought you'd want to know. I read it standing in the kitchen, morning light coming through the window above the sink. Margaret's clock ticked on the wall. The coffee maker clicked off. Outside, and the first green shoots of the tomato plants were pushing through the soil I'd turned 3 weeks earlier. I did not go to the funeral. I was not expected. I was not wanted. Tyler and I had not spoken since the phone call, and I imagined the service was small, a handful of church people, Karen managing the logistics, Tyler sitting in the front pew in a shirt he'd borrowed. I sent flowers. No name on the card. Just a note. For the woman who gave me life. From the woman who found one. Karen sent a text the following week. Thank you for the house money. Donna was comfortable at the end. The flowers were on her nightstand. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to say. If you've spent your whole life waiting for an apology that never came shaped right, you are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to build the door yourself and walk through it. I went back to work. The reading room was open every day now. 32 children had library cards they didn't have before October. A kindergartner named Lucas told me the beanbag chairs were the best thing in the whole building, even better than the bathroom. I told him I'd pass the compliment along. The tomatoes would come up in June. Margaret's recipe for pasta sauce was taped inside the cabinet above the stove. Some things keep going. That's the whole point. Every Thursday at 3, I read to the children in Margaret's room. It's the best part of my week, and the only appointment I've never missed. The beanbag chairs were full. 6 children, ages 4 to 9, arranged in a half circle on the carpet. The afternoon light came through the window and landed on the shelves in bright stripes. I was reading a picture book about a bear who got lost in the woods and found his way home by following the smell of his mother's cooking. The children were wrapped. The 4-year-old had her thumb in her mouth. The 9-year-old was pretending he was too old for picture books, but hadn't moved in 20 minutes. When the story ended, a girl named Sophie, 7, red hair, missing a front tooth, raised her hand. Miss Audrey? Yes? Did somebody really find you at a train station? The room went still the way rooms do when children ask the questions adults won't. Yes. A very kind woman did. Were you scared? For a little while. But then I wasn't alone anymore. Sophie nodded, the way children nod when an answer is exactly sufficient. Then she opened her book and went back to reading. I looked at the wall above the door. The Margaret Calloway reading room. Gold letters on navy. The framed photo of Margaret beside it. Reading glasses on her forehead, book in her hand, smiling at something just out of frame. On the small table by the window sat a juice box. Apple. The straw was straight. A child had left a pair of sneakers by the beanbag chair in the corner. Small. White. A little scuffed. I smiled. I looked at Margaret's name on the wall and thought about what she would say if she could see this room full of children. She would say, "Well, Audrey, I think the tomatoes turned out just fine." I used to think my story was about being left behind. It isn't. It's about who shows up after. I didn't survive to forgive my mother. I survived to prove that the girl she left on that platform was worth more than the family who drove away. And I proved it the only way that matters. By building a life worth living and refusing to apologize for it. Margaret Calloway didn't save me because she had to. She saved me because she chose to. A stranger at a train station with reading glasses and a paperback, and a question that changed everything. Have you eaten? That one question. That choice. Made by a woman who owed me nothing, who had never met me, who could have looked away and caught her train, was worth more than 34 years of blood. I think about her every day, when I shelve books, when I water the tomatoes, when I cut the stems just above the second leaf the way she taught me, when I sit on her porch and listen to the crickets, and remember that some sounds carry across 20 years like they were only yesterday. If someone in your life chose you, a teacher, a neighbor, a foster parent, an aunt, a stranger. Tell them. Tell them today. Don't wait for a holiday. Don't wait for a speech. Just say it. Because choosing someone is the bravest, quietest, most radical thing a human being can do. And the people who do it almost never hear how much it mattered. My name is Audrey Stanton. I was left at a train station with an empty backpack and shoes 2 sizes too big. And I found everything I needed. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone who chose you, or someone you chose, I'd love to hear about it. Drop their name in the comments. No explanation needed. Just the name of the person who stayed. And if this is the first video of mine you've watched, welcome. There are more stories like this one. Check the description. I've left a few you'll want to hear next. Subscribe, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for staying until the end. Margaret would have liked that.